Welcome back to Cheddar's Opening Bell. Between January and March of this year, Tesla dominated the electric vehicle market, accounting for 75% of all EV sales. That means for every 4 electric vehicles, 3 of them sold were Teslas. But with GM and Ford, even another name like Rivian, accelerating their efforts to produce more vehicles, consumers appear to be benefiting from this increased competition. These companies are eating away a little bit at Tesla's market share over the last 2 years. However, the rising cost of materials for batteries and even chips, that is creating headwinds for the entire electric vehicle industry. Here to discuss and dig into this further is Michelle Schneider, partner and director of trading research and education for Market Gauge. Michelle, let's just start with Ford here. Ford is projected to potentially announce weak Q1 kind of earnings, with earnings per share obviously kind of being weaker than the street is expecting, and a year-over-year decline of nearly 54%. What should investors look out for, especially as it relates to kind of their EV initiatives and this ramp up that the company is doing?
Well, yeah, the big story that came out is that they're really pushing this F-150 Lightning truck that they think is going to be like their next 1908 Model T Ford, that kind of sale. And Ford has a couple of advantages in that supposedly they have enough batteries in stock. They're repurposing seats and things from other models in actually Michigan. But overall, if you have to just look at the Ford, which is trying to be way more affordable, by the way, than Tesla and Rivian, Lucid also coming out with trucks. And yet their share is just really struggling here. And I think it speaks to the bigger issues that we have in the whole space of EVs. There's no doubt EV is the future, but then there's right now, which has been impeded by so many things, not the least of which is the fact that there's just not enough raw materials to go around overall, that the oil prices, although they've come up, that maybe not quite enough. And then you have a power grid issue to even support all these EVs. Consumers want to buy cars and there are none there. So all of this is really weighing heavy.
In terms of that market share story that you're mentioning there, I look at the last 2 years and Ford certainly has gained some market share, eaten away some of that from Tesla. GM has also here. In terms of maybe not reaching the potential market share kind of grip that they could potentially have, that doesn't seem to be on the demand side of things. I went to the International Auto Show here in New York, and I've got to tell you, the biggest crowds were around Ford. People were climbing into the F-150 Lightning, really excited about it in comparison to literally almost every other kind of automaker that was there. But the production side, is that the biggest issue, for this company?
Well, right now they have no cars. I mean, that's basically, if you go in and say, okay, I want to buy a Lightning truck or I want to buy the Mustang, which is also really hot, the EV Mustang, has a pretty high mileage rate in terms of before you need a charge, something like 379 miles, you're just not going to be able to get it. So if you're patient, yeah, could Ford turn around? Absolutely. But for right now, I would focus on Ford probably more than any of the other companies. I mean, obviously, if you can go back to 1908, they have a very long history. But Tesla is Tesla. Tesla is way more than just an EV. And that's really, I think, what Ford is competing with the most. Plus, Tesla has a huge presence in China. And when you go in California, which I just was at, you see Teslas. You see a couple of Rivians, a couple of Lucids, a couple of Mustangs, but it's still Tesla dominating. So we have a while, I think, before we really see that switch. I'm glad to hear that at the auto show, there was buzz around Ford. Probably would be the first other company that I would look to buy once the market settles down. But right now, you also have just the whole pressure of the market in general.
I mean, I think to your point, Tesla has proven itself to be just far more agile, especially when it comes to production and even production headwinds. I would almost akin that to the way that Ford was back when it invented, obviously, the assembly line and really was able to get into mass production. If it can reproduce something like that, I think that would be kind of the new wind for Ford, so to speak. But moving from Ford to another obviously major EV automaker, especially a traditional kind of legacy one, going all electric, GM, right? That is making pretty aggressive strides in the EV space, launching an all-electric Corvette. I know the president has said before that he is eager for Mary Barr to allow him to get into one of those, which is great buzz for GM there. They're also co-developing a series of affordable electric vehicles. What's your outlook on GM's kind of EV initiatives?
Well, Well, I think that obviously the Corvette is a hot idea. I mean, it's kind of like the Ford Mustang idea, but has it been enough to really lift the stock? No, same issues. Now, they are working on some kind of a battery. It's like a double charge battery. And that's really, again, going to be the rub is right now, if you live in a more remote place, if you're not living in a major city, whether it's a GM, a Ford, or a Tesla, or a Rivian, or a Lucid, or a Neo, whatever car, you cannot go anywhere beyond what you can get a charge from and then not necessarily find a charging station. So I think we have to go back with all these great intentions that these car companies have. And like I said, future, definitely EV. Gas guzzlers will go the way of the dinosaur, pun intended. But with power grids still not really there to support, these great ideas are futuristic, but not necessarily happening right now. So if you're looking to invest right now, I would definitely stand back and wait to see what happens, A, after earnings, and B, what happens with the market. It needs to find some footing, and right now it's having a lot of trouble.
Obviously, Tesla's a dominant dog in this race by a landslide. I mean, 75% of market share. Every four EV vehicles that are sold out there, 3 of them are Tesla. It's expected to produce 1.5 million vehicles this year. It almost hit that 1 million threshold, obviously, last year. This is despite some headwinds. And this is what I was saying about being able to manage around those headwinds. That's really attractive to investors. It dealt with plant shutdowns, obviously, in China. Which automakers do you think are positioned to take the most market share away from Tesla, albeit probably a small bite, maybe a nibble of the market share that Tesla enjoys?
I would probably, if I had to put my money anywhere on another EV car maker, it would probably be Ford. You have some other companies like Mercedes and BMW. Every Audi was actually voted the best in Forbes' #1 car of the year in the terms of the EV. So all of these are great, but Ford would probably be, just in terms of nuts and bolts experience and the availability that they will eventually have, that's real, I would go. But one thing I want to say about Tesla is that, again, you have to look at what's happening in the economy and the overall market. Tesla's falling as we speak today, hitting some very important support level at 900. So that too could take a little bit of a tumble, possibly even go down to about 750. So that's why I keep going back to the EV space is great, but you have to look at the whole macro right now and be very wary of, besides the headwinds we just discussed, the overall headwind is people right now may be shifting from any buying and really trying to preserve what they have, which is stocks like auto parts doing very well, or O'Reilly, because people are trying to fix what they already own.
Before I have to let you go here, I'm just curious, when you look at the auto space and you look at automakers like a Ford, like a GM, like a Mercedes, Volkswagen, Rivian, I mean, you name the companies that are positioning to go all electric here and have this EV adoption go mainstream. What do they need to do to make that happen, aside from the infrastructure issue that we know is something that they're pushing for? Obviously, the administration is also pushing for that to grow with the adoption of EV.
Well, I think that, again, this is definitely, obviously, all these car makers are rushing to do this because they know this is the future. I think the adaptability will just come in time once we get through this very rough period that we're experiencing right now in the economy. People are really worried about recession right now. Once we get through all of that, I think that that's really going to be maybe superseding the power grid issues. We cannot, though, undermine those power grid issues, as I said before. And, of course, copper is a huge part of what goes into these batteries. And copper right now has come off a lot in price. So the raw materials also have to settle down. And then I think maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe even 3. That's really when we'll start to see people say, okay, it's time to turn in my old clunker, get rid of gas and oil, go to an EV. They're affordable now. There's a lot to choose from. Competition is there.
I think you actually might be right there. I mean, I think in the meantime, we'll still continue to see adoption. But to your point there, listen, I have a car, and I went to the auto show just to kind of, gauge and get some insight, but also looking at it for myself. But I'm probably 2 or 3 years down the road before I want to make a purchase into an EV space. And I can't imagine I'm alone there, to your point, Michelle. Michelle, as always, we appreciate your insight. It's always great insight. Michelle Schneider, partner and director of trading research and education for Market Gauge.